welcome to this edition of Elvenhome and to an episode which really concentrates on, I think, the final bit of angst and discussion of what the design of the Art Deco hotel, including my first attempts at scratch building one of the floors or doing a mock-up. And I warn you now, it is a very rough mock-up, but I learnt a great deal about the proposed construction from doing that mock-up, and also to have a look at the scenic work that I've been able to do around the south of the station and where the branch line diverts from the main lines. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, if you're new to the channel, please do subscribe and you'll get to know when I upload, and you'll be able to see the other videos that I've done on this now nearly 3 years since I started building this layout. So let's move on to the first section where I'd have a look at responding to some of the comments that I got about the problems and trying to design and build the Art Deco hotel, and you'll see where I've got to, including my very rough, I keep saying that, first go at building one of the floors of the hotel. Time for a quick update on where I am with the design and build of the hotel. You'll recall from the last video that I was wrestling with various things that I wanted to solve in order to be able to use a 9mm dowel to provide a curved corner. I had lots of really good responses to the last video, thank you very much. One in particular from Mr. I don't know if it's Nada Fodder or Nada Fodder, suggested using a hot gun to bend the plastic to give me a curve, using the dowel as a template, a pattern around which to bend. And what you see in front of you, this misshapen piece, is my first attempts at trying to do that. Initially, I was getting a bit too close and the plastic was buckling. I found this 1mm thick plastic card really about the thinnest I could use without having real problems with buckling. I've got some 0.75mm and 0.5mm card, and they just buckled very quickly the moment the hot gun really started working on them. The more I practiced, the better I got at getting a better corner. This one's still a bit sharp. This one isn't permanently fixed at the angle, but you would be able to put it into the angle you want. But what this started doing again for me, you'll remember that when I originally was going to use a 16mm radius dowel, I just was concerned about how big a gap that left of just pure wall space. Even the 9mm dowel gives me lots of wall space. And although, as Mr. Nada Fodder suggested, I could cut windows in the corner, I'm starting to make the build to a level of complexity which stops making it fun and more of a chore, which is not the idea. This is a hobby and is fun. So it caused me to go back a little bit to the drawing board on the design and to go back and look at the kinds of designs that are still Art Deco. I will still have the tower in the front of the building, so there still will be curved, but I went back to look at the use of an angular corner wall, essentially at 45 degrees to the front and side walls, and decided that rather than just draw it all out and think about it, I would actually try and build something, because that's what it's all about. This will be one of the floors for the bedrooms, because that's the key part. The first entrance floor is fairly straightforward, and it made me start to think about what sort of windows would I want. And rather handily, I had already purchased windows which were going to be quite plain and set at the back. If I can show you, if I've got one to hand, which I think I have. Yeah, these holes are not quite the right size, but this was the kind of window I had in mind originally, which I was just going to sit behind in the gap here in that sort of way, which would be sort of 30s-ish and fairly plain, but I wanted a bit more depth. So building this has been really helpful in thinking about the way I was going to try and attempt to construct the building floor by floor, because even with a good sharp knife, getting absolutely straight cuts is quite tricky. and the more cuts you put into it, the more chance you have of cumulative error causing you to have gaps and which need covering over. I think this design will happily work, although what I had in mind was that, rather as I had done with the fire station, that you would build the centre block and then attach the two end pieces, which would have this wall at a 45-degree angle. I'm not sure that will work very well. I may still do that, but I'm coming round more and more to trying to build it all as the whole front piece, but in two halves. So there'd be this piece and the side piece, cutting in, scoring here to be able to bend it round, and try and use a card carcass to actually construct the thing, which I will then overlay with probably a fairly clear the plastic card that you've seen before. This has also helped me to design what the window frames are going to look like, and I'll have to make the window frames. These are made from some half-round plastic card and some strip styrene plastic card, and the windows are ones that I had left over from the build of the fire station. Rather handily, I had already ordered 4 packets. It's the same style, but I've decided to change to this style of window. I've seen this style of window much more on Art Deco buildings than the one I was going to use. So building this mock-up of a floor has already taught me a lot about how I will want to construct the hotel. And in the light of that, I can now set down and properly draw out the hotel to scale so that I can then start building. So I'm hoping by the time you see the next video, it will be me in various stages of starting to actually build the hotel. The back of the hotel is going to be pretty much unchanged. I think I mentioned in the last video that I'll be building a fire escape, and the parts for me to build that I've nearly all got. I've got to get some strip styrene to form the frame, but I'm not too troubled by that. I think that will be fairly straightforward. But this shows the value of actually starting to build, because you begin immediately to encounter whether your ideas make sense. And also to think about how you are going to mask joins. I think also in this one you'll see that I've put the step in because you'll remember I was going to have pieces of strip styrene of different lengths to step it out here. Again, I'm not sure that's actually going to work very well, and it will be better to have this flat fronted and then decorate on top of that, which is what I think I'm now more likely to do. So that's a very quick update where I am on the hotel. As I say, from now on, what you should be able to see is me actually building something rather than just talking about it. So having completed that, now let's go on to the layout and have a look at the various bits and pieces that I've been doing over the last couple of weeks. Time to catch up with what work I have been able to do over the last couple of weeks. The first of which, as you'll see, is that the gasworks now has a name. The Sauron Gas Company. Those of you who may have joined the channel may not know that most of my names of places, all except I think one, are taken from the Lord of the Rings trilogy by J.R.R. Tolkien. And I'd always said that Sauron would appear somewhere, and it seemed the gasworks was the right place to do. These letters are from scale model scenery. I think, I'm trying to remember which size these are. 6mm, I think. Maybe a bit bigger, maybe the 8. But they're very good. I painted them first of all gold, copper, and then painted the fronts gold. And the kit comes with some pieces that you stick the letters to, so you can stick them onto the building. And I'm really quite pleased with that. So the gas company now has a name. I've also been doing some scenic work over the back there where you see the engine just moving round. At this point, I will put a clip that I took a little bit earlier, which shows the grass work at the end of the platform and then coming round to where these bushes are. This again is simply different types of green clump foliage with a little bit of underbrush. and mixed about a bit. With the underbrush, what I tend to do is take two colours and roll them into a sausage, mix them up and roll them into a sausage, and then fashion them and stick them onto the board. And that seems to work quite well at getting the variegated colour, which is more natural than all of one colour. I've started the work. If I move round to here and zoom in a little more, just a little more, you'll see that the gates have gone on between the fire station and a new wall, which is largely built out of stripped styrene with a brick paper, which is made in the way that I've shown you in the past using Excel. It's a little bit lighter than I prefer, and I will be darkening it down a little bit with some dry brushing. But essentially it's 1mm plasticard, which forms the wall, covered in the brick paper. Then I've used some, I think it's 1.5mm square, but it may be 2mm square pieces to provide the buttresses that run along, and they're covered in brick paper and stuck on. And then a 3mm piece of stripped styrene with a paper that I got from Scale Models, no, not Scale, Scale Scenes, which is a kind of stone effect, and I've used it elsewhere on the layout. In fact, if I go up on to there, you'll see that's the same paper that was used to provide the capping stones for the wall. So it's still being used down here on the wall, and you'll just be able to see there that the fence has gone in from the end of the platform to provide the boundary of what will be where the hotel is, and to start the work of putting the fencing around the back. And that style of fencing, I needed to order some more kits which have just arrived, so I've got to make them up. Again, this is Scale Model Scenery palisade fencing, and that is going to extend across, running straight until just about where the War Memorial is, and then it will hold the curve around behind the town hall and will run all the way up to the edge of the bridge there, and that will then define where the boundary of the railway finishes. Once I've done that, I can complete the work of ballasting. I've filled in some already using the Javis asphalt, which goes really nicely with this with the Ballast Magic and the ballast that I'm using, because I don't think it would all be ballasted there. It's much finer. It provides a bit of a gap between the rails and the ballast, and I will use that to fill in the area between where the fence will be and where the ballast currently is. The other thing that I was able to complete, if I go over to here, I'll insert another piece of video at this point. Some while ago I bought from PD Models loads to go into various wagons. Two of the ones you'll see are actually Harbin Hobbies miniatures, the covered wagon and the barrels. But the other things are inserts that I bought from PD Models and have painted up. So there's some barrels there, there's wood, bricks, various kinds of stone, and one load of coal. And that makes such a difference to those wagons, having that load in them. Below them there's a little piece of foam board, because obviously they're not that deep. They did require a bit of fettling to get them to fit. Interestingly, largely because very many of these coal wagons inside have modelled the supports that are there to support the walls or to be round the doors. So the depth, as the wagon goes down, the width of the wagon reduces at 2 pinch points, and that was not allowing the inserts to go in. So a little bit of work there has got those in, and that forms quite a nice goods tray now. One final piece, I'll zoom back out for this, which I only discovered this morning. I was looking at the layout for the coaling stage, and here you see an engine roughly in the position that it needs to be coaled and watered. And obviously the the water tower needs to be near enough that when this swings out, the rubber part here can be pushed into the tank to take the water. But also the train has to be able to travel underneath the coaling stage, because the whole idea is that, this is probably a bit too close now, it's not going to work. The whole idea is that the train, I moved that, there we go, the train sits, okay, disaster averted. That's the danger of recording things without testing them first. The engine now, as you see, that's where the engine, any engine would sit, where its bunker would sit, to be able to receive coal directly into the engine, maybe a little bit further out than that. But the key thing is the engine has to be able to pass underneath the coaling stage. And I discovered when testing this morning that if the coaling stage is down on the floor, there isn't enough room for the engine to pass underneath. So that's been quite useful in that I need to have the coaling stage raised just the height of the rails, because the clearance is just not sufficient if it's sat down on the floor where the bed of the track is. So that's a useful thing before I built everything to have discovered. And I pass that on to you should you get, if you're into N-Gauge and you want to get this kit, which is Mill Lane Sidings, I think. If you go back to when I built this, there's a link in that video for the where I got the kit. In fact, I'll put it in at the bottom of this video. So that's after that disaster and before anything else strikes me, I think that's enough for this episode, which, as I say, is a shorter one. The next episode will not be now for another 4 weeks, because I know I'm very busy over the next couple of weeks. And I don't want to put videos up unless I've got something really worthwhile to show you. And I hope by then that I'll be able to put up a couple of pieces about the building of the hotel, rather than just my angst at how on earth am I going to build it. If you've liked the video, please do give it the thumbs up. That's all very helpful. If you haven't subscribed, please do subscribe. It would be great to have you along. And please do leave comments. The comments I had after the last video, and indeed after every video, are just so helpful that I really look forward to receiving them and do my best to try and reply quickly to them. So until I speak to you again in what will be the middle of or end of May, enjoy your modelling, and bye-bye.